Welcome to History with Herodotus, where we embark on a journey through the vast expanse of human experience, guided by the lantern of curiosity and the compass of historical perspective. Today, we find ourselves at the threshold of one of the most pivotal moments in modern history, the Battle of Midway, a naval engagement that would alter the course of World War II and forever etch its name into the annals of time. In the early summer of 1942, the world was ablaze with conflict. The Axis powers, led by Germany, Italy, and Japan, had been making relentless advances across Europe, Africa, and Asia, leaving in their wake a trail of devastation and despair. The Allies, comprising the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union, were struggling to stem the tide of aggression, their efforts hindered by the vast distances and logistical challenges that separated them. In the Pacific, the Japanese Empire, under the leadership of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, had been expanding its dominion with breathtaking speed, conquering Malaysia, Singapore, and the Philippines, and pushing deep into the Dutch East Indies. The United States, still reeling from the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, was desperately seeking to regain its footing and counter the Japanese onslaught. As we delve into the events leading up to the Battle of Midway, we find ourselves in the midst of a complex web of strategic calculations, diplomatic maneuverings, and technological innovations. The Japanese, aware of the importance of the Midway Atoll, a small but strategically located island group over 1,300 miles northwest of Honolulu, had begun to plan an operation to capture this crucial outpost, hoping to draw out the U.S. Pacific Fleet and destroy it in a decisive battle. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., American cryptanalysts, led by Commander Joseph Rochefort, were working tirelessly to crack the Japanese naval code known as JN-25. This painstaking effort, which involved deciphering intricate patterns of letters and numbers, would ultimately prove to be a game-changer, providing the United States with vital intelligence on Japanese intentions and deployments. As the spring of 1942 wore on, the Japanese began to put their plan into action, assembling a massive fleet of aircraft carriers, battleships, cruisers, and destroyers under the command of Admiral Yamamoto. The U.S. Pacific Fleet, led by Admiral Chester Nimitz, was still recovering from the losses suffered at Pearl Harbor, but it had been bolstered by the arrival of new ships, including the aircraft carrier USS Yorktown, which had been hastily repaired after being damaged during the Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942. With the stage thus set, we find ourselves on the cusp of a great drama, one that would unfold over the next few days and decide the fate of empires. The Japanese fleet, with its imposing array of ships and aircraft, was steaming towards Midway, intent on capturing the atoll and drawing out the U.S. Pacific Fleet. The Americans, armed with their newfound intelligence and a deep understanding of the strategic stakes, were preparing to face their enemy in a battle that would be fought not just for control of the Pacific, but for the very future of humanity. There was Admiral Yamamoto, the brilliant and complex Japanese commander, who had spent years studying the U.S. Navy and was determined to crush it in a single, decisive battle. There is Admiral Nimitz, the calm and collected American leader, who had inherited a fleet still reeling from the shock of Pearl Harbor and was now faced with the daunting task of stopping the Japanese juggernaut. And then there were the thousands of sailors, soldiers, and airmen on both sides, each with their own story, their own fears, and their own hopes, all of whom would soon be thrown into the crucible of war. As the Japanese fleet approached Midway, the Americans were busy preparing their defenses, aware that the next few days would be crucial in determining the outcome of the war. On June 3, 1942, a patrol plane from Midway spotted the Japanese invasion force approximately 700 miles west of the atoll and immediately radioed back the news to Admiral Nimitz's headquarters. This timely intelligence allowed the Americans to put their plan into action, as they had been anticipating this moment for weeks. The U.S. Pacific Fleet, now alerted to the presence of the Japanese, began to move into position, with Admiral Raymond Spruance's Task Force 16, comprising the aircraft carriers USS Enterprise and USS Yorktown, taking the lead. Meanwhile, the Japanese were unaware that their plans had been compromised, and they continued to steam towards Midway, confident in their superior numbers and firepower. On the morning of June 4, 1942, the Japanese launched a massive air raid against Midway, with over 100 bombers and fighters descending upon the atoll. However, the Americans were ready, and their anti-aircraft defenses, combined with a squadron of U.S. Marine Corps fighter planes, managed to inflict significant damage on the attacking force. As the Japanese aircraft returned to their carriers, they reported that Midway's air defenses had been neutralized, but in reality, the atoll was still very much intact. The Americans now saw their chance to strike back, and at 7:00 a.m. on June 4, Admiral Spruance launched a counterattack against the Japanese fleet. Torpedo Squadron 8, led by Lieutenant Commander John Waldron, took off from the USS Hornet, followed by Torpedo Squadrons 3 and 5 from the USS Enterprise and USS Yorktown, respectively. As these squadrons approached the Japanese carriers, they were met with fierce resistance from enemy fighter planes, which had been circling above the fleet. Lieutenant Commander Waldron's squadron was almost annihilated, with only one pilot, Ensign George Gay, surviving the ordeal. However, their sacrifice was not in vain, as the Japanese carriers were now forced to maneuver evasively, disrupting their flight operations and creating an opportunity for the American dive bombers to strike. At 10:22 a.m. on June 4, the USS Enterprise's Bombing Squadron 6, led by Lieutenant Commander Clarence McCluskey, spotted the Japanese carriers below and began their attack. The first to dive was Lieutenant Richard Best, who scored a direct hit on the Japanese carrier Akagi, setting its flight deck ablaze. Minutes later, Lieutenant Commander McCluskey and his wingman, Lieutenant Wilmer Gallagher, dove down upon the Japanese carrier Kaga, releasing their bombs and scoring 2 direct hits. The resulting explosions and fires proved catastrophic for the Japanese carriers, which were now transformed into burning, sinking wrecks. The USS Yorktown's Bombing Squadron 3 also scored hits on the Japanese carrier Soryu, sealing its fate. As the American aircraft returned to their carriers, they reported that 3 Japanese carriers had been sunk or severely damaged, a claim that would later be confirmed by reconnaissance missions. The Japanese, realizing their losses were mounting, began to retreat, but not before launching a counterattack against the USS Yorktown, which was hit by 2 bombs and severely damaged. As the sun set on June 4, 1942, the Americans had gained the upper hand, but the battle was far from over. The Japanese still had a significant surface fleet, including battleships and cruisers, which could potentially overwhelm the U.S. Pacific Fleet. As the sun set on June 4, 1942, the Americans had gained the upper hand, but the battle was far from over. The Japanese still had a significant surface fleet, including battleships and cruisers, which could potentially overwhelm the U.S. Pacific Fleet. However, Admiral Yamamoto's plan to draw out the American fleet and destroy it had been foiled, and his forces were now in disarray. On June 5, the Japanese launched a half-hearted attack on the USS Yorktown, but it was repelled by American aircraft. The Japanese then began to withdraw their remaining ships, marking the end of the Battle of Midway. The aftermath of the battle saw the Japanese Navy never fully recovering from the loss of 4 irreplaceable carriers and hundreds of experienced pilots. As Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto would later say, "I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, looking into the abyss." The American victory at Midway had turned the tide of the war in the Pacific, and the Japanese would never again have the initiative. The battle marked a significant shift in the balance of power, as the Americans began to gain the upper hand in the war. In the months and years that followed, the Battle of Midway would prove to be a crucial turning point in the war. The American victory had prevented a potential Japanese invasion of Hawaii and had given the United States the opportunity to launch a counterattack against the Japanese. The battle had also shown that air power was a decisive factor in naval warfare, and the Americans would go on to develop this concept further in the years to come. Today, the Battle of Midway is remembered as one of the most significant naval battles in history. It is celebrated as a testament to American bravery and ingenuity, and its legacy continues to be felt in the modern United States Navy. The battle has been the subject of numerous books, films, and documentaries, and it remains a topic of fascination for historians and enthusiasts alike. The battle was a pivotal moment in world history, one that had far-reaching consequences for the outcome of World War II and the shape of the modern world. The Battle of Midway serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of perseverance and determination in the face of adversity. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, the American forces were able to emerge victorious through their bravery, skill, and strategic thinking. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, remember that to understand the present, we must first understand the past.